The night they announced the charity gala, Sophia Merritt was standing in the break room of St. Catherine's Medical Center, eating a lukewarm cup of soup at 11 o'clock, because she hadn't had time for lunch. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her sister, Leah. "Did you see this? Colin's hosting the Hargrove Foundation Gala. Black tie, downtown. He's got some model on his arm now. Thought you should know before someone else tells you." Sophia read it twice. Then she set her phone face down on the counter and finished her soup. That was how she learned her ex-husband had moved on. 18 months earlier, Colin Ashford had sat across from her at their kitchen table. The one she'd spent 3 Saturdays refinishing because they couldn't afford a new one, and told her he needed space. That was the word he used, space, like she was a wall closing in on him. Like the life they'd built together was something suffocating him instead of holding him up. She found out later that space had a name. Genevieve Lane, 26 years old, photographed every other week at some rooftop bar in Manhattan with a glass of champagne and nothing behind her eyes except the pleasant blankness of someone who had never had to worry about anything. Sophia had been 38, a surgical nurse with 11 years at St. Catherine's, a 6-year-old son named Miles who still slept with a stuffed elephant named Gerald, and a car that needed new rotors. She did not have champagne. She had $11 wine from the corner store and a bathroom that leaked every time it rained. Colin left in October. By November, he and Genevieve were at a Halloween party together, photographed by someone who thought it was funny to send the picture to Sophia's sister. By December, he had forgotten to send Miles a birthday card. His son, he forgot his own son's birthday. Sophia did not fall apart. She thought she might in those first few weeks, lying awake at 3 in the morning listening to the radiator knock and wondering how she had miscalculated her entire life. But Miles would climb into her bed at 6:30 and ask for waffles, and there was no falling apart when someone needed waffles. So she made the waffles. She picked up weekend shifts. She took Miles to soccer on Saturdays and helped him with his reading on Sunday nights. She moved the dining table so it didn't remind her of Colin, sitting there telling her he needed space. She repainted that wall herself, a deep sage green that Miles said looked like a frog, and she laughed and said, "Yes, it does." And that was that. She did not hear from Colin except through the lawyers, and even then only about the bare minimum. Child support arrived late 3 times in the first 6 months. She called his attorney and was told there had been processing delays. She did not believe that. She believed Colin Ashford was a man who found inconvenient things easier to ignore than address, and that his son had become inconvenient. She didn't say that to Miles. She said Daddy was busy. She said it until she nearly believed it herself. The invitation arrived in early March. Not to her, she found out about it the same way she found out about most things in her life since the divorce. Secondhand, late, and with that particular flavor of humiliation she had grown almost used to. Her colleague Beverly, who had once worked in cardiology with a cardiologist who ran in Colin's social circle, mentioned it the way people mention things they know will sting. "That gala he's throwing," Beverly said, arranging syringes on a tray with the focused calm of someone not quite meeting her eyes. "The Hargrove Foundation one. I heard he actually sent you an invitation. Did you get it?" Sophia looked at her. "I haven't checked my mail in a few days," she said. She had. She checked it every day. There had been nothing from Colin. But that evening she went to her building's mailbox and found, tucked behind a water bill and a flyer for a pizza place, a cream envelope with a return address she recognized as Colin's firm. Inside was a gilt-edged invitation, heavy cardstock, the kind that costs more per sheet than her grocery budget for a week. "You are cordially invited to the Hargrove Foundation Annual Gala, benefiting pediatric cardiac research. Saturday, April 19th, the Whitmore Grand, Chicago. Black tie." And below, in Colin's handwriting, he had actually handwritten something, which meant this was deliberate. "Hope to see you there, Sophia. It would mean a lot." She stood in the hallway of her building and read that last line 3 times. It would mean a lot. She knew what it meant. It meant he wanted her there. It meant he wanted Genevieve to see her. He wanted the people in his new life, the donors and the socialites and the women with champagne, to look at Sophia Merritt in whatever she could afford to wear, and know exactly who she was and exactly what he had traded up from. She understood this the way you understand a cold room the moment you walk into it. Not with thinking, just with skin. She threw the invitation in the recycling. Then she stood there for a moment. Then she took it back out. Miles asked her that weekend why she was quiet. They were at the park near their apartment. The small one with the climbing structure that had a broken rung nobody had fixed for 2 years. Miles was navigating it carefully the way he always did, mapping his route before committing. And Sophia was on the bench watching him and thinking about nothing and everything. "I'm not quiet," she said. "You're doing your thinking face," he said. He had reached the top. He surveyed the park with great satisfaction. "You only do it when something is annoying you." "Things annoy me constantly," she said. "I'm a nurse. Is it Dad?" She looked at him. He was 7 now, and sometimes she forgot that he was watching everything, absorbing everything, filing it away with a precision that startled her. "No," she said. "Not really." He seemed to consider this. "He texted me," he said. "He said he might come to my game next month." "That's good," Sophia said. "He said might," Miles said. He said it the way a 7-year-old says something he has learned to hold loosely, at a distance, so it can't hit him as hard when it drops. She recognized it because she had watched him develop that skill over the past 18 months, and it broke her heart every single time. "We'll see," she said. "Yeah," said Miles. "We'll see." She was not going to go. That was her position for 3 weeks. She told herself the story in different ways. "I have nothing to prove. I don't need to see him. It's a trap and I'm not walking into it. The gala is on a Saturday and Miles has soccer. All valid. All true." What was also true, she had been eating lunch alone in the hospital break room for 18 months. She drove a car with bad rotors. She had not been to anything requiring formal attire since the hospital fundraiser 2 years ago, where she'd worn a navy dress she'd bought on clearance that was slightly too short. She was tired. Not of her life. She was not the kind of woman to be tired of her life, but of being the person who had been left. Of existing in Colin's story as a footnote. The first wife, the poor one, the one he outgrew. The week before the gala, she worked a double shift that kept her until midnight. She was walking to the parking structure when she nearly ran into a man coming around a corner with his head down looking at his phone, and they both stopped and apologized at the same time. "My fault," he said. "I wasn't paying attention." "Neither was I," she said. He looked up. He was perhaps 50, silver at the temples, with the slightly rumpled quality of a man who had been at the hospital for hours and forgotten to care about his appearance. He had a visitor badge clipped to his lapel. The name on it said Lawson. "Gee, you're a nurse here," he said. 11 years, she said. He nodded slowly. "My father's on the 4th floor. He had a bypass this afternoon." He said it the way people said things when they were still processing them. Factual, controlled, a little hollowed out. "He's in good hands," Sophia said. "The cardiac team on 4 is excellent. That's what they tell me." He looked at her for a moment. "Were you his nurse?" "No, I'm surgical. But I know the team. They're good." "Thank you," he said. Just that. But he said it like he meant it in more than one direction. His name, she learned later, was Grant Lawson. She learned it because he came back the next morning. And she happened to be in the hallway when a colleague pointed him out and mentioned that his father was the Raymond Lawson. The Raymond Lawson who had spent 30 years building Lawson Capital into something that appeared in financial headlines on a regular basis. She didn't think about that at the time. She thought about it later. Grant's father spent 9 days in the hospital. Sophia was not his nurse, but the 4th floor and surgical shared a supply corridor, and Grant Lawson spent long hours there, and she passed him 3 more times in those 9 days. They talked the way people talk in hospitals, in the margins of things, standing in hallways, drinking bad coffee out of paper cups. He asked her about her work. She told him about surgical nursing, about what she actually did versus what people assumed she did. He listened in the particular way of a man who is genuinely curious rather than politely waiting for his turn to speak. He mentioned his daughter's birthday. He mentioned that he'd missed 2 of them because of work, and that he still wasn't entirely sure his daughter had forgiven him. He said it without asking for sympathy, just as a fact about himself. She told him about Miles, about the soccer games, about the climbing structure with the broken rung. He laughed at the broken rung. She liked that he laughed. On the 9th day, when his father was discharged, he stopped by the nurse's station where she happened to be doing charting and said, "I'd like to buy you dinner." "As a thank you, I didn't treat your father," she said. "You were kind to me," he said. "That counts." She looked at him for a moment. He was not flirting, exactly. He was just stating a thing he believed to be true. "Dinner," she said. "That would be fine." They had dinner. Then they had dinner again. By the end of March, she was looking at herself in the mirror of her bathroom, while Miles argued with a cartoon in the other room, and she was noticing for the first time in a long time that she looked like herself again. Not the version that had been left. Not the footnote. Just herself. She told Grant about the invitation without planning to. It came out over dinner one Tuesday, almost accidentally, and she watched his expression as she described it. "He wants you there to humiliate you," Grant said. He said it simply, without heat. A man who understood how certain other men operated. "I know that," she said. "Are you going?" She looked at her wine glass. "I keep going back and forth." "What's the thing that makes you want to go?" he said. She thought about it. "I don't want his version of me to be the last word," she said. "He left and he took the story with him. In his version, I was the wall. The thing holding him back. I want." She stopped. "You want them to see you," Grant said. "Yes," she said. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds human," he said. He was quiet for a moment, then, "Go. I'll take you." She shook her head. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said. "I've been wanting to take you somewhere that isn't a Tuesday night in a booth." "Let me take you somewhere real." He paused. "Also, I am going to be honest with you. I have been looking for an excuse to see you in something other than scrubs." She laughed. It surprised her. "You should know," she said. "I have a son, and a car with bad rotors, and I haven't worn anything black tie in 2 years. The car we can fix," he said. "The rest sounds like something I'd like to know better." She called Leah the next morning. "I need a dress," she said. A silence. Then Leah said, "What kind of dress?" "Black tie." "The Hargrove Gala." Another silence, longer. "Sophia, you're going?" "I'm going." "With who?" she told her. The silence after that one was different, more like a held breath than a pause. "Grant Lawson," Leah said slowly. "The Grant Lawson, is there more than one?" "Sophia, a beat. Do you understand what you're walking into that gala with?" "A person," Sophia said. "I'm walking in with a person. A person worth approximately." "Leah, I'm just saying Colin is going to." "I know what Colin is going to do," Sophia said. "That's the point." The night of the gala, Miles was with his grandmother. Sophia's mother, Barbara, who had driven down from Milwaukee, specifically because Sophia had told her only that she had plans and needed help, and Barbara had not asked questions, only arrived with a casserole. Sophia put on the dress Leah had helped her find. Emerald green, floor length. The kind of dress that cost more than she would have spent on herself in the previous 18 months, and which Grant had quietly insisted on when she tried to argue about it. She had argued anyway. He had waited her out with the patience of a man who understood that the argument was part of it. She looked at herself in the mirror. She did not look like a footnote. The car that arrived was long and dark, and the driver held the door with the seriousness of someone who took his job as a small contribution to the dignity of the evening. Grant was already inside. He saw her and something moved across his face. Not performance, just a man genuinely taken aback. "You look extraordinary," he said. "You said that about the scrubs too," she said. "I did not. You implied it." He smiled. She sat down and the car moved through the Chicago evening, and she looked out the window and let herself feel whatever she was feeling, which was complicated and warm, and somewhere underneath all of it, terrified. "Whatever happens," Grant said without looking at her, "you don't owe him a reaction." "I know," she said. I know," she said more gently. "Thank you." The Whitmore Grand at night was the kind of building that made people feel the occasion. Light poured from its windows onto Michigan Avenue. Guests in black tie moved through the entrance with the self-conscious pleasure of people who had dressed for something and arrived somewhere worthy of it. Sophia had been inside once before, years ago, for a conference. It had looked different then. Everything looks different when you're the wife. She walked in with Grant's hand at the small of her back. Light, not possessive, just present. And the first thing she registered was the flowers. White and gold everywhere, cascading from tall arrangements on either side of the entrance. The second thing she registered was the woman in burgundy near the far end of the room, laughing too loudly at something, and the man beside her. Colin Ashford had not changed. That was what struck her first. She had half expected him to look different, to look like someone who had been transformed by whatever it was he'd gone looking for when he left. But he looked exactly the same. A little more groomed, maybe. The tuxedo was expensive, but his face was the face she'd looked at across a refinished kitchen table, and there was something almost disappointing about that. He had not seen her yet. Genevieve Lane was beside him, tall, polished, in a dress that photographed beautifully and communicated nothing. She was scanning the room with the particular attention of a woman who wanted to know who was watching her. Sophia felt Grant shift slightly beside her, not toward Colin, just present, a steadiness. "Drink?" he said quietly. "Yes," she said. "Please." They were at the bar when Colin saw her. She knew the moment it happened, not because she was watching him, but because she felt it. The kind of shift in a room that occurs when something goes differently than planned. She heard the silence in his vicinity before she turned. He was staring. Not at her face at first, at the dress. Then at the man beside her, then at her face. And she watched him work through it in real time, the recognition followed by confusion, followed by something she could only describe as the particular expression of a man whose punchline has evaporated. Grant handed her a glass of champagne. His eyes did not go to Colin. He was not performing anything. He was simply a man at a party, handing a woman he was fond of a glass of champagne. "Thank you," she said. "Of course," he said. He said it like it was the only reasonable thing. The evening moved. People circulated. A string quartet played something elegant and unobtrusive near the windows. Sophia talked to the wife of a cardiologist she actually knew, and then to a woman from the hospital board she'd met at a fundraiser, and then to a retired judge who wanted to talk about his knee replacement with the enthusiasm of someone who had recently discovered a fascinating topic. Grant moved through the room with the ease of a man who had been in many rooms and found most of them manageable, stopping to greet people he knew, introducing her without fanfare. "This is Sophia. She's a surgical nurse at St. Catherine's." Not his date, not his companion, just herself. She noticed Genevieve watching from across the room with the fixed attention of a woman trying to work something out. She noticed Colin speak to someone near the bar, then look in her direction, then look away. He came over 40 minutes in. She saw him approach and felt, not fear, not anger, but a kind of steadiness. The same steadiness she felt walking into a difficult surgery. "You know this. You've done harder things." "Sophia," he said. He kissed her cheek the way people do when they are performing grace in public. He smelled like the same cologne. That was also somehow disappointing. "I'm so glad you came, Colin," she said. His eyes went to Grant, a bead of calculation perfectly visible if you knew how to read him. "This is," he began. "Grant Lawson," Grant said, and extended his hand with the pleasantness of a man who had already correctly identified what was happening and found it mildly interesting. The name landed. She watched it. Colin's handshake didn't change, but something in his jaw did. "Of course," Colin said. "I know the name. Are you?" He let it hang, that careful casualness that meant, "Are you really here with her, or is there another explanation I haven't thought of?" "I'm here with Sophia," Grant said simply. "She speaks very highly of this hospital's cardiac work. The foundation does good things." "Yes," Colin said. Yes, it's an important cause." A pause, the kind that exists because one person is searching for the next move and cannot find it. "Miles doing well?" Colin said, turning to her, the pivot. The reminder, gentle as a knife. "Miles is great," Sophia said. "He's been working on his reading. He's very good at it. He'd probably love a card from you sometime." She said it quietly. She did not say it to wound. She said it because it was true, and because Miles deserved to have someone say it out loud in rooms like this, where his father wore a tuxedo and hosted charity galas and forgot birthdays. Colin's expression shifted. Something moved through his face that she hadn't expected. Not anger, something more complicated. Yes, he said. "I'll do that." She did not tell him it was fine. She just nodded. Genevieve approached a few minutes later, after Colin had drifted away with the slightly unfocused energy of a man who has encountered something he needs time to reprocess. She was polite. She was even warm, in a way that Sophia suspected was genuine rather than strategic. A young woman who had not entirely thought through what she'd become part of, and was now having a complicated evening. "You look beautiful," Genevieve said. She meant the dress, but she also meant something else. "Thank you," Sophia said. "So do you." A pause. Something passed between them, unspoken, the way things sometimes pass between women who are standing in the same story from different positions. He talked about you, Genevieve said, finally quietly. When we first, he talked about you in ways that weren't. She stopped. Kind? Sophia offered. Genevieve's expression did something. I believed him, she said. I shouldn't have believed everything. Sophia looked at her for a long moment. No, she said. But that's not your fault. Genevieve looked like she might say something else, then thought better of it. She moved away. Sophia watched her go and felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, something quieter. The recognition that most people in a bad story are not villains. They are just people who made choices they now have to live with. Later, during dinner, she was seated at a table near the window. Grant was on her right, a hospital donor, and his wife on her left. Across the room, at the table near the stage, Colin sat with Genevieve and a group of people who laughed at everything he said. She watched him for a moment. He was performing. She could see it from here. The particular performance of a man who needed the room to believe he was exactly where he was supposed to be. She had spent 6 years worrying she was making him smaller. She had made herself smaller instead, by degrees, slowly enough that she hadn't noticed until the space was already gone. Grant leaned toward her slightly. You all right? Yes, she said. And she was. Not because the evening had been what she'd imagined. Not because she had walked in and destroyed him, because she hadn't, because that wasn't really what she'd wanted. But because she had walked in. She had walked in wearing the dress and carrying her name, and standing beside a man who introduced her as herself, and the room had seen her, and she had seen herself seeing herself. And that was the thing she had actually come for. He forgot my son's birthday, she said. In December. Grant was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. You mentioned it once. I needed to say it again, she said. Out loud. In this room. Okay, he said. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. They left before the last speech. The night was cold in the particular way Chicago in April still holds its breath between winter and spring, and she stepped out of the Whitmore Grand and breathed it in. The car was waiting. Behind her, the Gala glittered on. In the car, Grant did not ask how she felt. She appreciated that. He asked if she was hungry, because they had barely touched dinner, and she said she could eat, and he told the driver to take them to a diner he knew near the lake that was open until 2 and had very good pie, and she laughed because she had not expected that, and he said he was serious about the pie. It was exceptional pie, and she believed him. At the diner, in a booth with yellow seats and a laminated menu, she ate cherry pie and drank coffee that was better than it had any right to be. And she told Grant about the first time she'd made Miles waffles after Colin left. How she'd burned them, and Miles had said they tasted like camping, and she had cried in the kitchen, and then they'd eaten the burned waffles anyway. Grant told her about his daughter's forgiven birthday, how he'd shown up a week late with a stuffed dog she hadn't asked for, and she'd named it Harold and carried it everywhere for a year, and maybe that was its own kind of apology. Harold, Sophia said. Harold, Grant confirmed. Miles has a stuffed elephant named Gerald, she said. He looked at her. Our children name things very formally, he said. Apparently, she said. Outside, Chicago at midnight was doing what Chicago at midnight does. Still moving, always moving, that particular city hum that never fully stops. She looked at it through the diner window and thought about Miles asleep at her mother's house with Gerald under one arm, and thought about the Gala continuing somewhere behind her, and thought about Colin giving a toast she would never hear, and felt. Free was not quite the word. Not yet, maybe. But lighter, something settling. I'm going to fix the rotors, she said. Grant looked at her. The car, she said. I've been putting it off. I'm going to fix it. He smiled. Good, he said. You should. She drank her coffee. He drank his. Outside, the city moved. She had worn the dress. She had walked in. She had said her son's name in that room, and Colin had heard it, and now it was midnight and she was eating pie, and none of those things were small things, and she knew that, and it was enough. It was more than enough.